Welcome to Feelings and Other F Words. I'm Dr. Daryl Appleton, and buckle the hell up because this week we are talking about emotional labor. We're talking about freight and this idea of the weight of decision-making fatigue, of invisible labor. We're going to be diving into it with my guest who's an expert on this after I'm done nerding out with you all. But really and truly, we're going to be talking about how it impacts us from a decision-making fatigue standpoint, from emotional burnout, from this idea that it actually impacts our identity and our agency in our lives. So backing all the way up, emotional labor or invisible labor, and I'm going to use these words interchangeably, was something that was actually coined in the 80s, 1989 to be exact, so maybe the 90s, but we'll give the 80s their due. Invisible labor is this reference to the unnoticed, unpaid, unacknowledged work that keeps relationships and households functioning. And it typically falls on, guess who? Mothers and women. And interestingly enough, if you look at evolutionary psychology, and there's lots of studies, one in particular I remember learning about in college, that if it wasn't for women, traditions would go bye-bye. We would have no traditions. Women actually are the carriers of that Christmas cookie that your nonas made forever. And it's not to say that men don't carry on their own traditions. It's just overwhelmingly women tend to genetically and physically hold on to traditions to pass them down, which I think is fascinating. But this is a little bit more about the here and now. Pew Research Center in 2020 did a study and they found that 65% of childcare and 60% of routine housework in heterosexual households was absolutely put on the woman. Women performed those duties 65 and 60% more, even when both partners worked full time. And you might be sitting there and some of you might be like, duh, Daryl. And some of you might be completely shocked. And I think that's interesting in itself. Now, mental load isn't just about tasks. It's about the anticipation. I keep saying that word wrong. It's about the anticipatory nature of the tasks at hand, the project management, the emotional regulation for me, for everybody else. Think about going to your in-laws and maybe you don't get along. Think about the emotional labor that takes just to prepare yourself for whatever attacks might come your way. Think about walking into a dance recital like we had this weekend and all of the preparation that needed to come beforehand, not just are their costumes pinned? Are they ironed? Is their hair done? Do we have extra hairspray? Is there a bag to put everything in? What about water bottles? Oh God, what water bottles are they going to want? Because they're 4 and they're going to scream about it. Did we put ice in there? Now we have to interact with parents that we don't necessarily know. Do we have our tickets? I could go on. You see where I'm coming from here? Just a random example, not one I've ever lived through, clearly. But that's what we're talking about. And research does show that when you are consistently managing mental load, it absolutely contributes to decision-making fatigue. The what's for dinner conversation isn't about what's for dinner. It's about who is making the decision and thus spearheading said thing. I can't possibly make another decision, I'll die, right? For me, Mother's Day, all I wanted for Mother's Day was for Jimmy to plan something. I gave him like 2 or 3 parameters to help him. I was like, I want to wear heels. I want something with a view, and we need to eat because our kids are going to be with us. So they need to be able to eat food that they will enjoy there. And he delivered. We had a lovely, lovely Mother's Day brunch in Newport. Yeah, in Newport. I say that like it wasn't memorable. It was incredibly memorable. I always just get the places mixed up and I don't want to say the wrong place. And then we went to Home Depot and I was in my heels and my dress picking out flowers. Like it was lovely because it's exactly what I would have wanted and I didn't need to plan it. That to me, it was a beautiful day. But with this, right, with this chronic mental load, research also shows, and this was a 2022 study by the APA, the American Psychological Association, shows that women are 28% more likely to report poor mental health when they carry a disproportionate share of emotional and cognitive labor in relationships. So if you're wondering, why is my relationship not where I want it to be? One of the aspects, not all, this is not all encompassing, but one of the aspects might be around emotional and cognitive labor and load. And if you're wondering, maybe this is it, maybe I feel disconnected from my partner, you may want to listen to our expert who's coming on. His name is Zach Watson. He's a mental load coach. He is a recovering man-child, his words, not mine, and a fair play facilitator. And I think it's fascinating because he works primarily with men and couples to unpack invisible labor and emotional weight and decision-making fatigue that flies under the radar. And it really does, in his words, it kind of underpins almost every relational breakdown when it comes to this stuff. So his content, and we have all the links. Check out the blurb here in this episode. We'll link everything. You can work with him. He's got some free communities that are amazing. But his content is almost part self-experiment and part social commentary. And I think that's so important to me because he's learning as he goes. And that I love about him. And his content really tackles questions like, why do so many men need to be reminded to buy birthday cards? And why is just tell me what to do not the progressive flex that everybody thinks it is? So his content to me is refreshing and approachable. And I think it really helps us rethink our to-do list, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, whether it's the conversations you need to have. But we got into some really interesting stuff, and I challenged him a bit on some things. And I think that you need to decide for yourself if he changes your mind. So stay tuned. We have Zach Watson coming up talking about this emotional freight. Stay tuned. All right, sir. I have many questions. I have so many questions. And I think what's important is, how did you arrive at this specific corner of mental well-being, of relationships, of the internet? Like, how did you get here?
How far do you want me to go back? I can give you the 3-minute, I can give you the 15-minute.
Give me the therapist in me wants you to unbox your childhood, but we won't do that.
I think it honestly started in 2015. I was inspired reading The Monk That Sold His Ferrari, and the whole moral of that story was like, okay, you've learned a bunch of stuff. Now go back and share it. You're not allowed to just hold on to yourself. So I was like, the past 2 years, I'd been deep into, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Landmark Forum, and a lot of personal development work. So I was like, I'm going to make an audiobook. Turns out you got to make a book to make an audiobook. So I wrote a book, self-published. I don't talk about it these days because I don't think it's the greatest piece of my work from a 25-year-old. Made the book, self-published it, made the audiobook. And I was like, well, I guess I got to make some marketing for this. So I'm going to start making some YouTube videos because my student, and it was meant to be sort of like I was a teacher at the time, and I really wanted my students to get more of an education outside of math, which I was teaching them math and science. So I wanted them to pick that book up. And if they wanted to understand all of the things that Zach was going to teach me about life over the next year, they could binge that if they wanted to. So I started making YouTube videos, and probably over 3 or 4 months, just loved making videos. So from 2016 to about 2018, I committed to making about 1 video a day, just getting used to it. Over time, that actually really hurt our marriage. So I was married in 2015. I was spending probably up to 90 minutes a day on a video. We got separated in 2018. We got back together, and we didn't have the words back then for it, but it was because I was putting all the mental load on her. I'll go to 2020, COVID happens, and I'm still teaching. My students start talking about TikTok, and I'm like, you guys make trash videos. I can't believe that video got 50,000 views. Meanwhile, I'd made almost, 1,500, 2,000 videos, I think, at some point.
Wow.
A bunch of live streams, a bunch of short ones. That not one video had ever broken the 100,000 barrier. Was talking about having a pride flag in my classroom, and it was filled with hate and terrible comments. Meanwhile, my students staring at the ceiling fan, saying some random phrase, getting 50,000 views. So I was like, all right, well, I'm giving TikTok a shot because they're a minute, they're not going to create a huge rift in my marriage if I take 10 minutes to make a TikTok every day. And then in 2021, I'd been making one every work day, and our child came. So first time dad, went on 3 months of paternity leave. And in that time, I had nothing, like there's a lot of sleep deprived nights, and you can't talk to your wife because she's stressed out and or trying to sleep. And she doesn't want to hear your shit because she's got enough shit herself. So you go to TikTok and you share it over there. And so my first two videos that really blew up were, I was talking about the sixth S, which I know you and your twins, I bet, I forget your husband's name, Jimmy.
Yeah.
I'm sure he either discovered this one or found himself too. The sixth S that they don't talk about is smell, I think. I was really struggling to get our newborn down, and realized if I just put Alyssa's shirt over my shoulder, that it would calm her down. That was not a part of the 5 S's. So that was my first like viral video. The second one, like a week later, was talking about, I'm on my night shift, 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. And a bunch of people got really confused by not reading all the captions in the video. It ended up at 5 million. A bunch of people thought I wasn't feeding our child from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. So they're very confused. And I started coining that type of video a Karen catcher, where they don't read the whole video caption. Right. And so they misinterpret it. Mm-hmm. So that shot me from about, 1,000 followers on TikTok to 50,000 in a couple weeks. So all of a sudden I had a bunch of moms following me, saying to their husbands, listen to that guy. And then Roe v. Wade was overturned. I was like, I don't have a voice in this space anymore. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't even feel like my outrage is worth airspace. Like, I need to make space for other women. They're going through this. And then at one point I just said, all right, well, I'll go into study mode. So I asked my people what books I read next, and they said Fair Play. Multiple people said to read Fair Play. Have you read Fair Play? Mm-hmm. So read that, started giving my like real-time reflections on, those first couple chapters hit hard. And they're really hard and I kind of got back into making consistent videos and started talking about how we're implementing the Fair Play method, or I was trying to understand invisible labor. And so one of the videos I made, I tried to be more vulnerable when I realized that I was just not making the internet a better place by shitting on a bunch of guys. I was trying to be more vulnerable. And so I said, I think I just added mental load for my wife. We were talking about getting our kid ready for nighttime, and I said, which pajamas should we use? Like, I could have chose that, and that video did pretty well. And what does any good content creator do? They make the same video in a slightly different flavor. Mm-hmm. The next one hit 6.4 million, and it was me saying, an example of where I added mental load for my wife, part infinity, and it was saying we're trying to put our infant at this time down for a nap. Alyssa, should we do water or milk? And then I had this like self-reflection, like I could have easily just chose for her and said why, and she could have pushed back, but like I could have chosen for her and given her a default answer. And so I said that, and again, like any good content creator, you keep trying to strike lightning again. So that was part 0 and part 1 kind of, and then I kept making the series. About 3 months later, 30 series later, people started saying, can you put out like education about this for the men in my life? And note, in this time, I had switched careers from teaching over to sales because I wanted to be at home more. I wanted to eventually be a coach. I knew I needed sales skills. So in this time, I'm starting to grow in my sales career and kind of influencing the guys around me, trying to just drop in this invisible labor vocabulary in my team meetings. And at some point, those sales skills were really useful because someone said, we need you as a coach. Like, can you help us? And so I got the Fair Play Facilitator training. And the market kind of came to me. They're like, you're clearly pretty good at talking about this. This has been really helpful. I started getting DMs saying like, you're helping us change conversations at home because your messaging is a lot more palatable than like, maybe some of the other content creators out there. And so as I was hearing more and more of these messages that I was helping people articulate mental load in a way that they hadn't before, and because, I look different from most of the people talking about mental load, I started saying I need to make my videos significantly more palatable because I want to help men understand it. Like, I'm preaching to the choir to a bunch of women, even though it's 91% of my following. Like, the hard part is reaching the men like they're trying to meet. So I hired a coach and said, okay, I'm ready to monetize. I had about 250,000 followers at that point. After that, those first 2 mental viral videos tripled my following overnight. And so then 2023, I started having my first couple coaching clients. And then a couple viral videos later, my books were filled up. I left my full-time job. This is now about a year and a half ago. So about a year and a half ago, left my sales job, and I've been a full-time coach for men to understand their feelings and other F words, and as well as understanding invisible labor. And it's been bumpy, it's been challenging, but knowing that this is what I get to do every day comparatively to selling software or teaching 8th graders math feels pretty good.
Right. And I think, any great story has a journey, and that is clearly a journey. I know I'm going to get this question, and as you're talking, I can already see the DMs coming in of, you switch between talking about like, oh, my business and my following count and this thing that is really heavy and people are going through. And I know somebody's going to say to me like, why is it okay for him to monetize on our pain? And I know it's so much more than that. So how do you navigate that when people are like, oh, you're just doing it for the views, you're just doing it for the likes? Like, obviously there's so much more behind it in the teaching and this general, like, okay, like, let's be better for our partners. But how do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think, I don't know if I've lost friends about this, but definitely there's been some interesting and or like stuffy conversations that I've had with a couple of the women influencers that talk about very similar things. One of the things that I've seen is that, so I'm thinking of like Laura Danger, Abby Eckel, she's a page turner. Those 3, a lot of what they're talking about is helping women that are like, they maybe do see invisible labor, they maybe don't have the vocabulary for it, but they're like putting up with it and they're not quite angry enough to make change, or they're just kind of suffering and not in their confidence about it. And so I think their content is really helpful for them to move down the pipeline of change in their home. Like you have to have enough like emotion to make change. At some point, I think if you have a resistant partner or husband that is like not seeing it, like sometimes you need more palatable messaging. That's, I think a lot of like, there's some really heavy emotional videos that a lot of them make that stir up things that need to be stirred up if we're going to improve. I think there's like the beginning of the pipeline is what I think a lot of those women need. They need to be empowered to stand up. And then I think once they've been standing up and they're having this conversation, like, God damn it, why can't I get this through to the men in my life? They might need a slightly different tool to have the next set of conversations. And right. I would say that that's probably where I'm helping out the market is like, I'm a different looking person that is trying to use a lot of corporate like analogies, trying to use like a lot of like career ladder type analogies. I'm working on proposal mode on my book right now. And we're trying to figure out like, how do we go about packaging this so that we like welcome the guys into the table, I think there's a huge part of that. I'm giving them what they want, but also what they need. And they don't always know what they need, which I know I've heard you talk about is like being able to articulate your feelings. And a lot of the women that you work with, like they might know the difference between overwhelm or shame and guilt and sadness and loneliness versus a lot of guys like, I'm just angry. Right. Because that's what society's taught us, is that we're just angry. And that's the appropriate emotion for men to have. You don't feel anything else besides anger. So I think that I'm meeting the pipeline of change. I'm meeting people at a specific part of that journey.
And that to me is incredibly important because a lot of the people I work with, I have this formula of like, you need to name it, you need to notice it, and then you need tools to navigate it. And people get stuck on, I see it, it's happening, now what? For the people, and maybe we need to go a little bit further back, how or is there a difference between mental load, invisible labor, emotional labor? Are they all the same thing? Like for the people out there that are like, this is the first time I'm hearing this, like what do those things mean and are they the same?
Sure. They could be the same. My personal take on it from, I think the main sources that I kind of derive my education from is the Fair Play book, Rose Hackman's Emotional Labor, Gemma Hartley's Fed Up. I feel like there's another obvious one that I'm missing. It'll come to me. I usually say invisible labor is sort of like the umbrella term for all of it. And then I typically break it into three main categories from there. So there's domestic labor, and or physical labor. So that pick a chore that you've either had a client talking about or is relevant in your home right now.
I mean, in my home, a physical labor, I think it's the
Give me just any general any chore, and then I'll break it into its different aspects.
For me, the most gripping thing chore-wise with our children is sorting through their clothes because they grow so quickly, and I'm constantly having to sort through them and do that whole thing. And there's two of them.
Beautiful. So there's the physical labor of like you're doing laundry, you're noticing that like they don't fit. There's the physical putting them in specific areas. Once you're making a decision, it's like finding like a physical location for if you want to hold on to them for siblings down the line, if you want, or choosing to donate. So it's like the physical moving of the things, maybe the physical labeling of the things.
Yeah.
Then still within this invisible labor umbrella, our next one would be, I would call mental labor or mental load or cognitive labor. So that's the thinking. So like, okay, we're looking at 4T right now. It's a little tight on them. It's going to fit for another 3 months. So but in 3 months it's going to start to be cold. So this short sleeve shirt and or these shorts, like probably not going to fit. So you know what? We're probably going to need to get new ones. I'm going to set a reminder in my phone for 3 months to look at shorts and in short sleeve shirts again for our twins. So it's like calculating, it's remembering, it's putting in like some executive functioning skill to make sure that the thing happens. I think so. When I think of domestic labor is invisible, when I think of like domestic physical labor that's invisible, it's like, yeah, you can probably catch it on a camera, but you're probably not going to notice it if you didn't have the camera footage. Like when I vacuumed the rug this morning, Alyssa might not know the difference of whether I did or not unless she sees the dirt in the little capsule thing. Similar there, like unless you're like inspecting the drawer, Jimmy, or if he were doing it and you weren't doing it, like you guys might not notice that, some of the not fitting things are being culled out of there. So it's invisible in that like it's not super obvious. Even like lawn mowing sometimes is kind of invisible. Like unless it's really overgrown, you might not notice that the lawn got mowed. So I think there's a ton of labor that's invisible. So there's the physical, mental, I think is definitely invisible. For people that are watching the video, this will be obvious, but I'll kind of narrate. So it might look like it's like that puzzled look where you're kind of looking off into the distance. Like that's why it's invisible, because that's the only evidence that you have that something's happening. I know for me, I made a video recently of like what mental load looks like on Zach on a day-to-day basis is me patting my pockets, is me looking for my phone keys, wallet. Right. And then the third aspect is the emotional labor. So I would say that there's two kind of main aspects. Like there's the caring about something, like the consideration of the emotional impact. So let's say, one of your kids, like maybe, hopefully not at, age 4, they're not feeling like self-conscious about how clothes look on them. At some point that'll certainly be an emotional experience. But I know for my wife, like it's an emotional experience for her if our kid's midriff is showing because I put on a shirt that didn't fit, and she might be aware that I'm not paying attention to whether a shirt fits well before I put it on her. So she might be doing the mental load to the cognitive labor to think about, all right, is he going to end up putting this on our daughter? And I'm not going to notice it until we get to the family event and our kid's belly's out. Or do I need to move it? And then the emotional labor of like, how is that going to impact me? How is that going to impact our toddler?
Mm-hmm.
So the emotional piece is like the caring about things, or it's, I think, the emotional manipulation of how you show up. So this is kind of what Rose Hackman talks about in her book, is saying like, if she's angry at me, right, because she's wearing a shirt that doesn't fit and we're at a family event, her managing her anger so it doesn't show and making small talk with people and like giving me side glances whenever she needs to like let a little bit of steam out, like that's the emotional labor of like giving a different front comparatively to the way you're feeling inside.
Sure. Yeah. And it's interesting because as you're talking in my mind, I'm like, yes, and also yes. Like the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I ask my robots here what the weather is because I need to know what to put them in. Is it going to change? Is this? What about school? Oh, they have an after school thing. Okay, what about that? Does this fit? Do I need more? And you're absolutely right. And there's this book, Behave. I forget who wrote it because my brain can only apparently do one thing or another after kids, but Behave. And they talk about this body of research about you only have so many fucks to give during a day. And when you think about mental load or invisible load, if so much of that is going to getting other people dressed around you and wondering and worrying about all the extracurriculars and how the weather's going to change, on top of then you put a really good piece into perspective that I didn't even think about of, now I'm annoyed at my partner for not helping or for doing the thing that I now need to undo. That is more withdrawals out of my emotional bank account. And at the end of the day, I'm zonking out in front of the TV and we are not having any time to connect because I just can't. Do you find that to be a pattern of people who are like, as all these micro things build up, that it impacts the macro of a relationship? Or I can feel the gentle parenting leave my body when I'm overwhelmed with so many, small things. Like, do you see this to be a common theme? Is this a Daryl thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things I also see is that a lot of the women that, there's like one or two videos I made a post about. One of them was like, guys, where I think you're royally fucking up 15 seconds at a time is like, not like if you could just leave your shoes by the door, if you could actually like in the place that has been talked about and delegated, that has a little rim for if it's wet. The moment when you're shaving your beard and you don't take the 5 to 10 seconds to like get rid of the shavings in the sink, or like actually putting the socks into the hamper rather than leaving them right next to it. In those moments, I think that there's a lot of unregulated. So what you were talking about there, I think was like, and I think I heard you talk about this recently, was that the fucks to give is almost like how many times you can emotionally regulate yourself and is like finite. Yeah. So similarly, like doing the emotional labor of not flipping out when you see the socks right next to the hamper, and just calmly putting them in there. Like I would bet that the emotional regulation that's happening there is loneliness, because there's loneliness in that if I don't do this, I'm the only one that's doing it and no one else is going to do it, and feeling lonely in that. And there's like a lack of being able to express that, because it feels weird for so many of us to be like, I felt lonely when you didn't put your socks in. Be like, what the fuck are you talking about? You feel lonely because I didn't put the socks in. Like to many people, that sounds crazy. To me and Alyssa, we've been practicing talking much more about our emotions. Like, so we get these gluten-free cookies. We didn't end up baking them and just left the dough in the freezer or in the fridge. And yesterday I was just moving something to get something behind it, and I realized it was almost empty. I was like, oh, Alyssa's been eating all the cookie dough out of here. I didn't know that it was being eaten at all. And I had this moment of feeling a little bit lonely that she didn't include me in, that she was having the sweet treats. I thought this was a team effort. And so last night, so when I discovered that, I like went into her office while she was on a call, and I just like dropped my jaw for like comic effect, but like, oh, you've been eating all these. I found out later she felt shame from that experience of me kind of shaming her that she'd been eating them. Later on, I came back to her and said, hey, I recognized that I was feeling lonely in that moment, and I needed to express it somehow, and I was trying to be comedic, and I was wondering what was happening for you. And she said I was feeling shame, that I was being shamed for, eating chocolate and cookie dough. And then when she had the last one at the end of the day, I had one out of the 12 pack. She had left out the wrapper, and I managed the dishes. I managed the kitchen for the most part. She left it out a little bit passive aggressively, maybe saying like, I can't believe you. She had the experience of like, I can't believe you ate a bunch of them, when it turned out I only had one. And then this morning, she had said like, and you ate a bunch of them. I was like, Alyssa, I had one of them. And so she felt angry and hurt that I had her experience, and like you've said, also is like perception is reality. She had the experience that I had a bunch of them, and she definitely didn't take account for how many she'd had. I had one, but like, I hear you're hurt. And even though like it didn't match reality, that I had like one is not a lot, I was able to still hear her hurt, even though it didn't match up with like my reality. And I said, I'm glad that I asked and or checked in with you about it, because I was feeling lonely, that like I thought you had forgot and left the packaging out for I'm the only one that's going to clean this up. And similar with sometimes the cat food cans that she will feed the cats, she'll put it in the sink, and then it's my accountability to rinse them out, throw them into the recycling. So we've normalized in our home using what many people might feel as like not exaggerated, but like heavy emotions, I think, to describe things. And I really appreciate it. I've gotten a certification from Connection Codes. They use anger, shame, guilt, fear, loneliness, sadness, hurt, and joy as like almost like your main food groups, or like your primary colors to describe everything, because it's so much easier to empathize with somebody, because we all like, they've described it as like when we see hurt on a brain scan from you and me, we're experiencing pretty close to the same thing. Your overwhelm versus my overwhelm might look very different on a brain scan. Your anxious and my anxious might look different, but those like 8 core emotions, like those are going to look very similar on a brain scan, so we can empathize with each other a lot better.
And that clarification, I think, is important, because I can hear all my New Jersey brethren in my head being like, fuck out of here. I'm talking about, I felt shame with the cookies, right? Like, and I think it's wonderful, because we need to label things appropriately, even if we feel comfortable or not doing it, because that's how we have communication. And I think whether it's industry agnostic, right? We have all these intergenerational workplaces. Our homes are obviously, we're blending in families and whatever baggage and trauma we come with. Like, it's important to operationally define things and have those things be something that we have like a baseline on. Because what I see me and Jimmy get into sometimes is I'll be like, well, I'm more overwhelmed than you are. Like, oh, you went to work all day? How the fuck was your lunch that you got to sit down and eat? Did anybody follow you into the bathroom and watch you pee? No. Weird. Okay. So I think like sometimes we get competitive. So I love that you said like, these are the ways that we can use these words that feel uncomfortable, but there's a reason behind it. It's not to sit there and nitpick everything being like, I felt shame when you did that. It's like, no, we can all understand what that means from a very scientific standpoint. Do you find that people have trouble practicing that? Like, I think like cognitively, lots of people can get it. Is it the practice of how people then apply it? And I guess like really my question is, how can people get to that place where they're applying it? Because I find that a lot of times people know, but then they get to the do and something kind of falls off.
Yeah. So I think even Alyssa and I struggle with this one. And, she had the coaches training too, is I liked the metaphor that they use in Connection Codes, which is like a lot of times we dam up emotion, and the goal is to be living next to a river. So if water is not scary when it's in like a stream or like a small river. You can put your feet in it. You can put your hands in it. You can even dip your head in it. Not scary. When a dam is breaking and it's flying at you, that is really fucking scary to have all that coming your way. And so it takes a lot of effort, I think a lot of people live in like a very dried up river where not much is coming out, and then eventually it comes out in large spurts. And so we get really afraid of hearing and or sharing emotions on a consistent basis. So it takes some, this is probably where coaching or therapy would be really valuable, is like breaking of dams, because it takes a safe space to be able to share in the first place and to keep sharing and hoping that you don't get a negative reaction. Because I know there's a lot of times I struggle when Alyssa shares her anger with me. I know, and I was curious, I heard you share about this, is that one of the things I currently talk with people about is when they're sharing anger, especially the guys, I say, for myself, if I'm not like driven by anger and it's not like primary anger, then I encourage looking underneath it like a rock. Because you had said that anger is only I think you'd said only a secondary emotion. And my wife was vehemently, she's like, no, anger is definitely a primary emotion too. And I'm often saying like, hey, what's happening for you? She's like, I'm very angry about this. I'm like, is there anything else there? She's like, no, let me have my anger. So there's a lot of moments where I think we don't have like enough emotional safe space to feel comfortable sharing our emotions. And I know that when I push back on that, like she is less likely to share her small angers with me, and then it only comes out in larger dams.
Yeah. And I think it's an interesting thing, because all of this is like a secret language that we don't know about ourselves until we explore. And we definitely don't know about our partners if they don't share or we don't explore it with them. And I think a lot of times I see people, and anger is a secondary emotion from a neuropsychological perspective, because it stems from fear, fight or flight. Fight is anger, but it stems from an amygdala response of, I'm afraid about something. I'm afraid that you're never going to put your fucking shoes in the bin with the rim. I'm afraid I'm going to do this alone and be lonely in doing that. Like, we are driven by fear. And I think a lot of times people don't understand that piece of it. And being able to get there and have space to get there. And you said something that hinges on psychological safety. Being allowed to get there is something incredibly important. Do you find that with taking on more emotional labor, do you find that there are people that push back being like, oh, now you're a savior, or now like, are there these other labels of, okay, you're doing this just to stop her from feeling this thing? Or is there any backlash from stepping up and stepping in because of power dynamics, or because obviously people on the internet sometimes are just people on the internet and have something to say?
So you're asking if in my like public facing content,
Yes.
if people are saying like, oh, I'm not sure I completely understand your question. Thinking about it.
Do you get negative backlash from it?
Yeah, I mean, I will say this is definitely where my male privilege shows up, I think, is that I get like a fraction of the negative input that She's a Page Turner is going to get on a similar video. Both of us were talking smack about this guy. He made an arguably creative video. It was also misogynistic, where he's golfing in the background, like B-roll, and he has a text message thread with him and his wife. And I think he probably used AI to turn it into like a country song. And so it starts out with like, hey, you left at 9 o'clock. It's almost 2. Like your phone is showing that like you're not close to home yet. You said you'd be home by 2. What's up? And he's like, oh, well, it looks like there's a bunch of people ahead of us and we're on hole 16. And then she's like, well, like, what the hell? Like, you said you're going to be home by 2. The kids are like getting antsy. Like, I was expecting you home by 2. Like, I guess you guys are just going to have to do 9 holes instead. He's like, it's not going to work. And so, Paige gave him a piece of his mind. I gave him a piece of my mind, and I got a little off the handlebars and started singing that he's probably going to have a divorce in 6 months and not going to understand why. I was definitely letting out some of my I think if I go 3 or 4 days without making a video, I need to make something emotionally charged to like get the emotions out.
Therapeutic release.
Yeah, that kind of is what it is. But I know that she probably got 50 DMs from guys saying really angry, terrible things. And I got one from him, which was like, he was saying, I think this guy's overreacting. Like, I thought it was funny. And similarly, Will Compton, the podcast, Bussin' with the Boys, it's pretty popular. Like, it had Donald Trump on back in November. Like, she critiqued one of the videos that he made, and like, she got death threats. Meanwhile, I got radio silence. My video didn't perform the same as hers did. Mine had probably a tenth of the views, but it got like 1% of the angry comments.
That's interesting.
So I would say, yeah, I get some backlash here and there, but it's not nearly what I think a lot of women creators experience that are talking about the same subjects.
Which I think kind of goes into emotional labor and safety of, if I create this thing, what am I going to have backlash about? And I am glad that you're in the space that you're in to help educate. And, you know, whether people take it seriously or not, I think it's great to have that resource and that outlet for sure. I think there's something too about, it's interesting because we had first met because I was on with Nikki Marie, and you had done kind of like a, well, I don't even know the term because this is how much I'm
podcast green screen reaction video.
Reaction video.
Yeah.
Thank you. God, my age is like really showing. You made yourself really tiny and I was on the background. That's what it is. But it was interesting because we were talking about something I had said about Jimmy, and I was like, he doesn't even know who our pediatrician is. And it's interesting because in that moment I was sitting with another mom venting, and you did this really good job of highlighting this is emotional labor, this is decision-making fatigue, and all these words that we're trying to normalize. And then in the comments, which you're not supposed to look, but I do apparently, I remember like getting all these comments of being like, that's not somebody I would ever want to be with. This sounds like a terrible man. And I was like, weird. This is the other side of it, because my husband actually does a ton. He's actually very much present in so many other ways that I don't think that a lot of men are. Maybe that's unfair to say, but definitely my father's generation was not. So it was interesting. And I was like, okay, they only saw a glimpse of that, but it was really funny to see the women and how they reacted to something like that. And I couldn't understand why, other than this is just a transference of energy or emotion, or maybe it's just the anger they're feeling from things, or reaffirming choices they made in quote unquote different men.
Two things I want to say there. One is that I think there are definitely a lot of women that are there to like release their mom rage, which like I'm okay with that. I don't love that, but like, you know, after Trump was elected, like I opened up my DMs. I said, I'm not expecting you guys to blow up my, you know, comment section and have this video perform really well because everyone's jumping in the comments. But I'm going to give you my DM. I might not respond ever, but I'm going to give you my DMs as like a safe place to let your rage out. I have about 600 DMs in there that I'm never going to touch, that like are just that safe space for them to have for themselves. So yeah, I think my comment section is often not the greatest place for learning. And that's why I started my free community, because I wanted to have a place where guys felt like they could ask seemingly innocent questions that they're going to get, you know, 5 women that are not happy about the fact that that question's even being asked. The second thing I wanted to say was, you were saying like how, you know, Jimmy does a lot more, at least than like his father's age and stuff. One of the things that I've been working on in my book proposal is recognizing that I think what I've discovered, I've worked with over about 130 men now, is that I think a lot of us have this experience like, oh, we're doing a ton, like comparatively, but we're all comparing to Everyone Loves Raymond. We're all comparing to Phil from Modern Family. We're all comparing to these societal expectations that we had growing up as millennials, Malcolm in the Middle or Home Improvement. And I think that I don't know that we're all comparing to the right people anymore. I think that I don't know what TV show would be a good comparable, but I think a lot of guys today are doing a ton. And so we keep saying we're doing way more than this low bar when I think the bar is much higher than we think it is. And so we pat ourselves on the back significantly too much because we think that we're closing a bigger gap than we actually are.
So what does it look like? Like, what is equal shared emotional labor? Is it obtainable? Is that the goal? Like, what's the goal?
I would say that when I look at equity versus equality, I'm aiming for equity. When we look at unicorn space, which Eve Rodsky would talk about as a passion-based, not a hobby, not like a side project, not a vanity project, but something that like you find interesting and like intrinsically motivating. I would go for equality around that. So if you're spending 2 hours to work on your project on Saturdays, give them 2 hours on Sundays. But when it comes to the other things, and we're about to not have daycare or preschool for the summer, we're thinking about, okay, what are we going to do over the summer to deal with this lack of childcare? What are we going to do for her career? What are we going to do for my business and career? And there's going to be some trade-offs that we make, but we're aiming for equity. So it's not going to be equal. She is likely going to be with her toddler significantly more over the summer, partially because as a family, we want to be earning more money. And so doubling down on my business is a smarter, like financially for us. So I think that as long as if you can be looking at your values on a consistent basis, are we headed towards the values that we want? I know you've advocated for like monthly meetings. I teach all the guys in my community to do weekly, I call them boring meetings. So it's an acronym: baseline, operations, relationship repair, initiative, which is like the mental load, nurture, and game planning. So like this morning we had ours. And this is, I know that there's a lot of things that Alyssa's thinking about on a consistent basis, kind of like thinking about the sizing of clothes. We have a wedding coming up and she's going to be a flower girl this summer. And so Alyssa was already thinking ahead about her tan line because she's going to have no short sleeves on that dress. She's going to have like a tank top strap for her almost 4-year-old. So like, thinking ahead about those things in those weekly meetings. So I know Alyssa's thinking about them probably around the clock. One of the things that I'm aiming to do is kind of doing some batch processing around a handful of those things. So I know there's home improvement projects we talked about this morning. We're looking at the pros and cons to removing her from daycare, the toll it's going to take on our car because it's a 30-minute commute, the amount of time that we're spending on that, the amount of grandparent time that we're spending on that. And I presented her with this whole agenda this morning of all the things that I've been thinking about. So coming back to your question of like, what are we aiming for here? I think that for a lot of guys on a consistent basis, it's like treating our career, our home life and our responsibilities as a partner and as a father, very similar to how we might look at our careers. When I was in sales and I was a sales rep, I would meet with my manager every week. When I was new to it, he would bring all the questions. Once I was in for a couple months, he was like, okay, bring a call you want to review with me, bring a deal you want me to review, bring a sales call that you had that you want me to look at. And I want you to show me what game plan you've been executing well on and what you haven't. And so similarly, I think there's a lot of guys that are allowing, I think this stems from the like happy wife, happy life ideology a lot of us heard on our wedding days, which I think starts out as, when we were first dating, like, what do you want for dinner? Oh, what do you want for dinner? And yeah, I'll be easygoing. I'll make it easy on you. You get to choose. And that sounds like a gift up front, right? Like, let's have tacos. Okay, I'm flexible. Let's do tacos. And then as we are allowing sort of, quote, doing air quotes, allowing her to make choices. Eventually that turns into she has to make the decisions because we're not making the decisions. And so I realized it took me too many years to realize this. As proud as I was that I made 3 main decisions for our wedding, which was I wanted bow ties, I wanted purple, and I wanted cupcakes instead of cake. I thought that I was like staying out of her way and trying to make minimal decisions, but have it be have it be some of me, but most of her. When in fact that's a ton of decision fatigue that she had around all those other things. Now some brides might want all of that decision making, choice making, and having it be that catered day. I think we're moving much further away from that, the way that, a decade or more ago, the way that women looked at weddings and how much decision fatigue that they actually want about that day.
Yeah.
I feel like I went on a tangent. I kind of lost myself.
No, I what I'm pulling from this is baseline is important. Whether that's baseline of our kind of previous note of, how you grew up or how much or how little your father did or the men in your life did, to baseline of your family unit's not going to look the same as somebody else's family unit in terms of division of labor or equity and equality. I think that, to me, if somebody were sitting in front of us right now being like, what's the best thing to do? My lens would be sit down and figure out what your baseline is, because Jimmy's a surgeon, right? Our baseline is going to be very different based on his literal availability. And if he is in charge of the kids and he's on call, I have to be ready to drop what I'm doing or have backup so he can go do his job. And that's very different than somebody else's. It's not better or worse, it's just different. So I think I heard baseline, figuring that out for yourself, and then hammering down on that and scheduling time. That's a hard thing to do, though. So what advice do you have for people that are like, that sounds lovely, I'd love to, the emotional labor of setting up the time to then go do that? What does that look like? How do we do that? Do you have tips? Do you have tricks?
That's where it's going to sound self-serving, but I'm hoping that it's received well. That's why I make the free content that I do on the internet, is to start conversations. Because I know that I think for a lot of the women listening, I'm going to share something with you that I think that I don't make short videos, because this is where I do get a lot of hate from the women audience. Is if you're trying to explain mental load to your partner, yes, this will take emotional labor. So if you're asking for it, this is the answer that I would give. This is my most common DM question, is like, how do I explain this to my husband? My first question back is, what do they do for work? And then what I typically do is I'm looking for what is the domestic, physical, what is the cognitive, and what is the emotional labor that they do in their career. Start labeling it for them. Just like we would label for a toddler, hey, it's a great job. Look, you persisted through that and you tied your shoes. We can be doing the same thing and labeling that for our partners, helping them see invisible labor show up in their day-to-day lives. Once we can start having them see it as something that they do and they feel confident, like, oh yeah, shit, I do emotional labor for my clients. I do emotional labor for my patients when they're really nervous about a surgery and I'm being really careful with their emotions about it. And, doing the cognitive labor of studying up so that I have all of the information to share with them on the spot. When they can see and label that for themselves, it's much more palatable to come to them and say, like, hey, do you realize that I own all the mental load of the clothing for our kids and the emotional labor for it? I think that it's much easier. They're like, oh shit, yeah, like I can connect those dots. But when that word is almost, invisible labor is almost weaponized their way and said, like, well, I do all the emotional labor out the kids. Like, what the fuck is emotional labor? What is this? But if they can have it labeled for themselves first, I think it's much easier. So depends on what stage you are in of this conversation. If you're in that early stage where you're trying to get them on board, that's where I would start. If you're already doing the emotional labor and you're just looking for a better way to do the emotional labor, that's what I recommend. Mm-hmm. I know there's a lot of women banging their heads against the walls trying to figure out how to explain this to their husbands in a way that works. And I think from there, one of the things that I coach my guys to do is to host that meeting. Another thing that we've been playing around with my book proposal that I haven't talked about a ton in my coaching, but some guys are saying, like, we don't really need a weekly meeting. I was like, okay, you got to do at least 4 bullet points, and it's a date night you get to have the date night if you don't have to talk about all the things. So you get to talk about random fun stuff that you would on a date night if before the end of the week you talk about those 4 things. And I recommend they consistently talk about sort of standard operating procedures. So the one we've been working on the past 3 weeks is meal planning, where Alyssa wants to know what the meal is. She wants to know what she can count on when it starts. And the past 2 weeks was like an iteration on how did I do? And I'm giving her like a self-reflection. Here's what I think went well. Here's where I fumbled. And here's like the adjustment that we can make for the next week.
Sounds like a lot of labor all around, but in a direction that is together rather than against.
Yeah.
Which I love. Yeah. And I think that's important for you guys listening. You need to put investment into anything that you want to see better. So I think saying like, I need you to take on more emotional labor, you need to be able to have that conversation and sit down and have it. Is it fair? Probably not. Is it worthwhile? Probably. Yeah. And on the back end, if you're on the receiving end of it, don't shut it down. You chose this person to live with, to be your partner with, be a partner with them. And I think like when you do that, and I've worked in couples therapy for a long time, when people actually stop and hear each other, really good things happen. Tell me about your coaching. Tell me how people can get in touch with you, involved with you, because I think you have so many great things to offer people that helps cut down on the emotional labor of figuring it out on their own and gives them a direction to move into.
Yeah. And to finish off the self-serving thing, I was going to say is I've really tried to aim to make a lot of my videos palatable, especially if you go over to YouTube, you're going to find a fair amount more like educational things that are meant to be palatable conversation starters. So
Love that.
If a kid doesn't like vegetables, then you start introducing vegetables in with things that they already like. Similarly, like I made a video recently kind of acknowledging different kinds of invisible labor that you might talk with a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old and a 13-year-old and a blue collar worker and a white collar worker and a stay-at-home mom. So if you need to talk about that to multiple different people, that one video can be a conversation starter. So YouTube is where you can go if you want to like do a little bit more deep dive learning. You can search my fun name is Recovering Man-Child, but if you search Zach Mental Load Coach, you'll find me. If you want to scroll and feel validated for the women, and guys, you're open to a little bit more being called out, probably go on my short form stuff. Instagram is my main platform over there. If you're looking to have more of these conversations, a safe place that's not the comment section, I'll have the link for the free community on the school platform. And if you're looking for support, if you're looking for these kind of conversations, a quarterly book club, as well as office hours every day. Right before this episode, I was on the Zoom call and 3 people showed up and we talked about their agenda bullets. I forced them to write out their agendas, and we all practiced doing our emotion wheels and helping figure out the difference between guilt and shame and have that solidified in their brain. So if they're looking for more hands-on support, I have a paid community mental load mastery where the men are in one place and the women are in like a sort of a separate place so they can both have their simultaneous safe spaces. Okay.
You heard it here. Seek him out. Zach Watson is a gem on the internet for his content, for his knowledge. This is somebody that you want to get in touch with. I tell people all the time, like, this is preventative medicine too. Even if everything's going well, you also want to keep your skills sharp because it's not a matter of if you're going to have a breakdown emotionally or a day or a tough day. Like, you need skill sets. This is fantastic. Thank you for being here. Final question. What is your favorite F word?
It didn't come to me like I was hoping naturally in this episode, but
Zach was very nervous about this, everybody, when we first started this call.
The main 2 I've been thinking about are fatherhood and feels. A lot of times when I'm feeling something and like, just sharing with Alyssa, I'm feeling angry or I'm feeling hurt or shame, that might not always go super well. So what I've been doing, and she can kind of choose if she's ready to be a safe space for me, is like, I'm feeling some feels right now. And she can be like, oh, what's happening for you? And that's like, okay, I'm ready to be a safe space. And then sometimes she's like, well, Yeah, no thanks.
Take your feelings and go.
Yeah, yeah. Go post your feelings in your community with your male support group, which is
I like Alyssa. She seems like my good woman.
Yeah, maybe I'll stick with that one. Is feeling feels as a phrase is like that's how we open up the door to if each other are a safe place to talk about feelings in the moment.
Love it. Low stakes entry point communication. Very, very good. Thank you for being here. Again, everybody check him out. I will have everything linked, and stay tuned for our next episode in 2 weeks. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.